Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the session. A couple of bits of housekeeping. We'll get started right away with Charles and JC. First and foremost, thank you, everybody, for participating in the virtual show. This is obviously day two. We've got a great crowd. We appreciate all your feedback on the virtual shows and, of course, the face-to-face events. Please send your feedback to us so we can get better and better as we move forward through the year. Secondly, as you folks are watching this presentation, to the right, you'll notice a little chat box. If you have any questions, technical questions, or especially questions for JC and Charles, we're going to try to answer a couple of live questions at the end of their presentation. We're going for 30 minutes till about 2:40 p.m. Eastern time. So just put those questions in if you have anything. But with that said, it is my great pleasure to introduce to everybody Charles Williams, the owner and managing member of Pioneer Realty Capital, along with JC Shelley, VP of Investor Relations. Charles is a Dallas native and former engineer turned financier. He's built a national reputation as a visionary commercial real estate lender, developer, and podcast host, bridging technical precision and financial innovation to create transformative real estate and investment opportunities across many communities. Charles, it's great to have you, and JC, great to have you both back at the show. The floor is yours, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. And hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing us a moment to tell you about the PRC Equity Fund. As Joe said, my name is JC Shelley, and I am the VP of Investor Relations for Pioneer Realty Capital. Funnily enough, I was texting Michael Marino the other day, and I asked if he and his family were doing okay since this wave of inclement weather came across the United States. You know, he reluctantly told me the weather here is actually beautiful. Jokingly, I told him I was certainly a bit jealous, but I would also like to recognize that while we got it pretty bad here, we were fortunate enough not to have experienced the power outages or some of the more extreme conditions that others have. And many are actually still without power. And while I know we have a limited amount of time, I think the well-being and lives of our families, friends, and neighbors are too important. And I would just like to take a moment to remember and pray for those who are having to deal with these unfortunate circumstances. So if we can just take a brief moment of silence just to recognize the unfortunate experiences that some of us are having to go through. Awesome. Thank you all so much for just taking a brief moment to recognize those friends, family members, and neighbors that may be dealing with some unfortunate circumstances. But now I am happy to move forward with the PRC Equity Fund. For more than 23 years, Pioneer Realty Capital has focused on real estate investment with a disciplined approach. Identify resilient demand, invest with strong fundamentals, and execute with integrity through changing market cycles. Today, I'm excited to introduce what we launched in October of 2024, the PRC Equity Fund. This fund is designed to give investors a straightforward way to participate in opportunities built around durable, long-term demand drivers. And one of the strongest drivers in America has always been education. Again, thank you for being here with us today. Many of you may be aware that we're living through a technological revolution that isn't just reshaping our country, it's reshaping the world. From AI to automation and new digital infrastructure, this technology is accelerating change across every industry. When technology moves this fast, one thing becomes even more valuable: an educated, skilled people who can adapt, build, and lead. That means the need for education isn't slowing down, it's increasing. And those students, faculty, researchers, and staff all require something essential: housing. University-centric markets don't depend on one employer or one trend. They're supported by constant inflows of people pursuing opportunity, training, and advancement. Our strategy is built to meet that demand by focusing on student and university-adjacent housing in markets supported by major public universities. In a moment, I'll introduce Charles. He and I will walk through the PRC Equity Fund in more detail, how it's structured, what we target, and why we believe it's well positioned for where the world is headed. We also will talk through an impending transaction that will net PRC Equity Fund and its investors at minimum $6 million. But before I do, I want to be respectful and be clear that we'd love for our investors and attendees to take note of this presentation. And my contact information is listed here. So as you listen, if what we share aligns with your goals, let's take that next step together. So the QR code shown here is a link to my calendar. You can take your mobile device, hold your camera up to the screen, and schedule some time with me now. Otherwise, you can call or text me directly. We have everything available to answer those questions and walk through the next steps. We're excited to introduce the PRC Equity Fund, which is a vehicle designed specifically for investors who want stable income producing returns while also achieving measurable social impact. The fund allows us to acquire, improve, and develop attainable student housing properties that serve everyday Americans, properties that communities rely on. At the same time, it provides investors with a structured, reliable pathway to long term value. So here's what we'll cover today. First, we'll look at the housing gap and why the need for attainable student housing is not just real, but it's urgent. Next, we'll walk through how the PRC Equity Fund operates, how it generates income, and what makes it resilient in today's market. And finally, we'll talk about the measurable good this fund creates, how your investment translates into people being housed, communities being strengthened, and profits being earned. By the end of our time together, our hope is simple, is that you'll see what we see, that investing can be more than transactional, that returns can be measured in dollars and in impact, and that PRC Equity Fund is uniquely positioned to lead this effort with clarity, conviction, purpose, and profits. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Pioneer Realty Capital's CEO and managing member, Mr. Charles Williams.
Thank you very much, JC, and thank you guys for attending our presentation. We're going to talk about the problem that's being solved. And as you know, with any good investment opportunity that's sustainable, it generally is focused on a problem that needs to be solved. And we do have a problem when it comes to student housing, particularly in tertiary markets and secondary markets. And the states that provide these public universities absolutely require an educated workforce, especially as this new economy is more and more reliant on advancing and emerging technology. And so, as we go through this, we're going to talk about the housing crisis, some of the micro trends that are driving this, the government shortfall in student housing, and why student housing. And then, as investors, I think the takeaways will become obvious. So, one of the things that's driving student housing trends is the growing enrollment. In times past, the average population of a student, college student, would be 18 to 22, maybe 24. Now we're starting to see the college attendees, that age range is between 18 and 28 in some cases, because people are going back to school to get an education. And I know some may argue that, well, aren't there a lot of institutions moving to online learning? While that is true, it is very, very difficult to have a lab in your home, or to have some of the advanced technology that's required to get a practical education. There are some courses that people can take that are less reliant on the facilities required to provide this technical knowledge and education. But many of these jobs of the future, if you will, many of this technology, you really need to be at the university in order to learn this technology. And that is one of the primary reasons why we're seeing this explosion in campus population. Now, the issue is, if there's an explosion in campus population, then those students, those faculty members, they're going to need a place to live. The university, which may be a surprise to some, is not in the business of providing housing. Even though there are some housing on campus, that's generally reserved to take care of the freshmen, individuals transitioning from high school to that collegiate lifestyle, and maybe some sophomore. But when those students become juniors and seniors and grad students, generally they require a little more updated, a little more freedom, and it generally translates into off-campus student housing. And so now, where does the funding come from to provide this housing? As I mentioned, The state governments provide the funding for education and things directly associated with the campus, but not necessarily off-campus student housing. And of course, these private and development groups are reluctant to going into some of the small towns to develop more student housing because if you think about it, the demographic that they're serving is a demographic that doesn't necessarily have a job. And so that creates significant exposure risk for those developers who would go into these markets. And as a result, you're not seeing a lot of developers go into those markets. So, student housing, in terms of demand for housing, it's stable in terms of enrollment. It's counter cyclical because when there's a recession, people tend to go back to school. The reason why they have access to capital in the sense that they get federal student aid loans, they get Pell grants, and so. It makes it a little bit easier and gives them an environment in where they can learn and focus so that when the economy recovers, they can leave with more skills. And so the key takeaways you want to take from this section is understanding that there is a strong need for student housing, strong fundamentals, strong demand. Uh, I mentioned earlier how major developers aren't likely to go into these markets to develop student housing, which is really increasing the demand for housing. The way we get around that is our nonprofit organization, which we'll talk about a little bit in detail, uh, because it's a tool that's been designed to reduce the burden of government, can go into these markets and provide capital through the tax exempt municipal bond market to acquire and develop these properties. And so PRC Equity Fund serves as a liaison or a really a bridge lender to the nonprofit organization. And the nonprofit organization provides a number of benefits to the universities in which it partners with, thus giving that nonprofit access to very inexpensive debt and to virtually unlimited capital. And that nonprofit organization is Project PRC, and that is the customer, the primary customer that the PRC Equity Fund serves. Now, with that being said, let's now give our attention to J.C. Shelley, and he can go into more detail about PRC Equity Fund, the role it plays, and why it is part of the solution.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Charles. And as he said in today's portion, I want to talk through two essential components of the fund, how the fund itself works, how we deploy capital, how we generate the returns, and why our structure is uniquely designed to protect investor capital. Then I'll cover the investor benefits and the overall financial model behind the fund. So this section is all about understanding the PRC Equity Fund, what it is, how it works, and why our strategy offers both strong returns and strong protection for investor capital. So investors in the PRC Equity Fund do earn an annualized 10% that is paid monthly and also participate in a 70% profit share. So the Equity Fund is the investment arm of our platform. It's a Regulation A fund that has been qualified by the SEC to issue securities to both accredited and non-accredited investors. It provides a high level of transparency, including audited financials, to provide a little bit more comfort to investors considering taking advantage of this opportunity. PRC Equity Fund's purpose is to fund the earliest and most critical stages of student housing projects, what we call pursuit and pre-development. These early costs can include land acquisition, entitlements, engineering, architectural design, and third-party reports needed to get a site shovel ready. Most developers struggle at this stage because the capital required is high risk and must be deployed long before construction financing is secured. The PRC Equity Fund helps fill that gap. It provides that fast, flexible capital and accelerates the development timeline and ensures that high quality student housing projects can move forward quickly. So our primary customer, as Mr. Charles alluded to, and we'll talk a bit further about here shortly, is Project PRC. Project PRC is a 501c3 nonprofit developer that specializes in mission-driven student housing. Project PRC sources these opportunities nationwide, but needs that early capital to move quickly on promising locations and opportunities. That's where the PRC Equity Fund steps in. We provide the capital needed to secure the land, complete the design work, and prepare the project for financing. As I stated, that pursuit or pre-development capital. But because Project PRC can issue tax exempt municipal bonds, it has virtually unlimited capital once a project is structured. And when those bonds close, typically within 60 to 90 days, the bond proceeds repay or refund the PRC Equity Fund. So when that transaction closes, the PRC Equity Fund receives a return of 2 times the capital it invested during pursuit and pre-development. So for example, if the fund invests $3 million in a project 60 to 90 days later, once that bond is closed, it receives $6 million back at bond closing. But the value doesn't stop there. Once that project is completed, PRC Equity Fund receives the remaining balance of those bond proceeds, the developer balance, and these proceeds often exceed 10 to 20% of the total development costs. So this combination of the 2x return, and if it's a development project versus an acquisition, but the remaining bond proceeds allows PRC Equity Fund to recycle that capital into additional developments, creating even more value, pay investors that annualize 10%, participate in that 70% profit share, and this cycle just repeats across multiple development opportunities each year. One of the most attractive features of our model is that natural downside protection. Because tax exempt bond closings occur within that 60 to 90-day period, our exposure window is very short. The capital is deployed, multiplied, and returned quickly. In traditional real estate, capital might be tied up for years before any liquidity event occurs. With the PRC Equity Fund, investors benefit from that early liquidity, that rapid capital recycling, and a much shorter risk horizon, while still participating in long-term profit potential. One of my favorite features about the fund is it's an evergreen fund. So this fund stays open in perpetuity until we close it. So assuming the fund is doing what it was created to do, as long as you are participating as an investor, you're earning 10% on your principal and participating in that profit share as the fund performs. So you control, when you exit in this fund. So that's one of my favorite features about the PRC Equity Fund. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Charles to help us further understand what Project PRC's role is with the PRC Equity Fund. So Mr. Charles, the floor is yours.
Okay, for a sake of time, I'm going to give a very brief overview. And for more information on Project PRC, you can go to that website, which is www.projectprc.org. But Project PRC is a charitable organization that has a charitable purpose designed to reduce the burden of government. And it reduces the burden of government by through its rental assistance programs, its eviction avoidance program, and its rent subsidy program. The universities we work with, they really love the rent subsidy program. We're able to take a portion of the proceeds from the project and put into a subsidy pool, and the university and administrators can have access to that pool of money to help offset the housing costs for students, perhaps who are first generation students or students that are facing some kind of housing insecurity. All of this is designed to keep that child in school and to help them to get an education. So, JC, we'll move to the next session just to kind of save a little time. So with that being said, I'd like JC to kind of go over the investor benefits and the financial model associated with this investment opportunity for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Charles. So now that we've covered how the PRC Equity Fund operates, let's talk about what this means for our investors, the income, the upside, and the financial structure behind the fund. So there are three major benefits that investors consistently point to. First is the stability that comes from the student housing as an asset class. Secondly, the monthly income. Again, the fund pays that annualized 10% monthly. And then lastly, that upside from the 70% profit share that investors participate in. The PRC Equity Fund is structured as an LLC and taxed as a partnership. To many of our investors, it makes a difference how that income is treated. So investors do receive a K-1 each year. So in addition to that, many of our investors have chosen to use their SD IRAs or self-directed IRAs, Roth IRAs. These returns can be tax deferred or even tax free. The investment is entirely passive. PRC manages all of the acquisitions. We manage all of the developments, operations, and reporting. And as I indicated earlier, this is a Regulation A fund that was qualified by the SEC. So the fund does operate under very strong transparency and compliance standards. We are required to have a broker-dealer that ensures that we remain compliant. And we also have a transfer agent that facilitates the transactions and provides the technology for us and our investors. Your investment helps fund the pursuit of new student housing developments and acquisitions. So these, again, are those before the project even goes vertical. Acquisition of the land, getting the land entitled, any third-party reporting. But these uses directly increase project efficiency, accelerate delivery, and support the long-term growth of the fund. And in a bit, you'll hear from Charles as he talks through our pipeline, but I wanted to provide an example based off of our projected net profit for 2026 and 2027 of what an investor's investment can look like for these next 2 years. But as I go through this, I do ask that you keep in mind this is an evergreen fund. So although I'm showing 2 years worth of projected net profit, an investor can choose to stay in the fund longer than 2 years. So PRC Equity Fund, again, is a Regulation A fund. The SEC allows us to raise up to $75 million. In this example, I'm using an investment of $500,000, and at $1,000 per unit, that would provide this investor with $500. We're projecting, in anticipation of this transaction we're closing, we are projecting raising up to $5 million. So that would provide us with a total outstanding unit volume of 5,000. Again, investors are earning an annualized 10% and participating in a 70% profit share. So for 26, we're projecting net profit of $6 million. 70% of $6 million is $4.2 million. For a $500,000 investment, this investor is receiving their 10%, which would be $10,000 or $50,000 rather, and then also participating in that profit share. And how we calculate that profit share is we take that 70% split and we divide it by the outstanding units. So for this investor, we take that amount, multiply it by their 500 units, and this would provide us an additional $420,000 for a total return in 26 of $470,000. Now, if we keep that in mind for 2027, we'll follow that same math. 27, we're projecting $20 million in profit. 70% of that is $14 million. We divide that $14 million by those 5,000 outstanding units. So this investor, again, is receiving their annualized 10%, which is $50,000, and then their portion of the profit share, which would be an additional $1,400,000 for a total return in 2027 of $1,450,000. And at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Mr. Charles to wrap it up for us and talk through that upcoming pipeline.
Okay, thank you very much. And JC, you can go to the pipeline slide if you like. That way we can kind of talk about that. So many of you and this is a lot of information I know for you to capture and understand how we're generating the profit that we're generating in such a short time. But I want you to understand that PRC Equity Fund is, think of it as a bank, a private bank that provides a upfront capital to um, the nonprofit project PRC. And so, in a practical example, if we provide $1.5 million, let's say this Houston Icon project that we're working to acquire, we're going to pay $89 million, or Project PRC is going to pay $89 million for that property. The bond transaction that we're closing is $101 million. Now, a PRC Equity Fund is going to advance $1.5 million in fees and earnest money to affect or to allow this acquisition to happen. There is some upfront cost that's required uh, on behalf of the nonprofit organization that's going to come from PRC Equity Fund. And in this amount, in this particular um, project, is about 1.5 million. When we close this transaction, that $101 million is going to obviously pay for the acquisition of the property, which will leave about $11 million remaining. There's the cost of closing the bond, which is going to be $4 to $5 million, and then there's going to be perhaps $6 million remaining. Well, part of that $6 million pays our $1.5 million back at a 2x multiple. So there's $3 million that goes back to PRC Equity Fund. So all of these transactions that you're looking at here, PRC Equity Fund is providing that upfront bridge capital or that short-term capital needed to close these tax-exempt bond transactions. And out of the proceeds of that tax-exempt bond transaction, that's where PRC Equity Fund earns its money. So PRC Equity Fund is not the owner of the real estate. This is not a real estate fund. We don't hold the real estate. We provide the initial capital to allow the nonprofit organization to acquire or to develop these student housing projects. So if
Charles, I'm sorry to interrupt. We have about 5 minutes, but keep going, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we want to make sure that's very important, that you understand the nature of this fund and why the profit potential is so great. So what you come to realize very quickly is that the more transactions that PRC Equity Fund does, the more money it makes. So the faster we can deploy that capital, the faster we get that capital back, the more deals we can put capital into, the more profit the fund makes. And so I think hopefully, and now this is our current pipeline that we're working to close this quarter. And as JC mentioned, based on this pipeline, we expect to generate a minimum profit of about $6 million. And I think with that being said, unless we have any questions, if you want more information about this investment opportunity, please reach out to us. If you want to see real live testimonials of folks that have been invested in our fund, please go to our website, www.prcequityfund.com. With that being said, I think we have a couple minutes to entertain questions.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, JC. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Very quickly, I know it's a Reg A deal. Is there a minimum investment for the first-time investor with you guys?
Yes,
Yes.
the minimum investment is 5,000.
Thank you, sir. And then GS is asking, is your company vertically integrated? If not, who actually builds, then manages these properties? And thank you in advance for the presentation, he said.
Yes, it is vertically. Well, we're not the developer. We hire a third party developer that we have a partnership with and who is a investor in our fund. But with regards to vertical integration, we have a fintech payment solution that we're going to be rolling out. that's under our company, PRC Technologies. And we have some other funds that are going to be participating. We have a PRC acquisition fund, which is for large cap investors. And we have some very large lead investors in that fund.
Terrific. And I just want to mention to some folks that came late, we are recording this session. We are going to give a copy to JC and Charles, an MP4 that they can put on their website, but we're also going to have them up on moneyshow.com tomorrow with the replays available. So I know some folks came late, so don't fret. Come back and watch it on moneyshow.com tomorrow, or get with JC and Charles directly, and they'll have a copy of it as well. You're inside the virtual booth now. Any information you need from them, there's a lot of information in the booth here. It'll stay open through this evening. So please contact them directly with any questions. Gentlemen, it was a great presentation. We did have a good crowd in here. I do want to mention you gentlemen are joining us as Diamond sponsors in Las Vegas, February 23rd through the 25th at Paris Resort. It is our first live event of the year, and we are looking forward to having you there. And please, folks, if you are in the area, come see us. We had a great show last year in Las Vegas, and we expect a bigger one this year. So please come out and see us. But JC and Charles, we definitely appreciate you participating today. All that information will be available to you guys later this afternoon. We appreciate you for doing this, and we want to thank all the virtual attendees for coming to see it. And again, come see us next month in Las Vegas. Thank you,
Awesome.
gentlemen, and have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.